is a frosty day across Canada. We are glad you have come here for some warmth, some hope. And Junior Smith, so great to have you with us today.
It's wonderful to be with you, Cheryl, and it's definitely warmer with you inside here.
Aw,
yeah.
That's so nice. Well, if you've been watching the news, you may have seen some good news about Asia Bibi. Top Pakistani courts have acquitted her on charges of blasphemy. This effectively clears the last hurdle, allowing her to leave the country where her life has been in peril and join her daughters. They are currently in Canada. She may be coming here. We're hoping she's coming here, but it has been a long 9-year court battle for her, and your prayers are still needed. The situation is still very dangerous. Extremists have staged protests and have continued to send death threats against her life. But such good news.
It is great news. For one, I'm praying for her, and it's very important for all of us to continue praying for her.
Yeah, for sure. And yesterday there was more inspiration in the news. An incredible story of forgiveness yesterday at a sentencing hearing for the driver of the truck in the Humboldt Bronco tragedy. The widow of the coach, Christina Hogan, you may have seen this, she said that she forgave the driver, Jaskirat Singh Sidhu, who pled guilty to the deaths of 16 people, including her husband. During her victim impact statement, and we'll be hearing more of those statements over the next few days, Christina said, quote, "I forgive you. The injustice and sadness is still there, but I've been forgiven for things I have done." And she said, if you ever want to know more about Darcy, come ask me. And what an incredibly powerful statement. You know, it's not even been a year since she has lost her husband, the father of her children, and just brave to say that.
That was a very tragic situation, and something good has come from it. She has been forgiven, and so she can forgive. And it's so important for us to talk about forgiveness and also mental health. It's that time of year where mental health issues are at the forefront and are being discussed openly. Thankfully, people are shedding light into these important issues.
And it's so important that we do talk about it, because when people are suffering in silence, then, you know, they don't ever feel the freedom to get that help. It's when you start talking about it that your healing journey can begin. So hopefully today we will encourage you to step out and do that. Get the help that you need. My guest today is an advocate for the disenfranchised and more recently for children. He'll ask the question, as a child, am I safe? And he will give us some tips on how we can all help.
And we have some entertainment as well. Musically accomplished Canadian musician Steve Bell performs later.
I'll look forward to that, and the story of a young man who struggled with mental health issues himself. Here's Crystal with that story.
The Canadian Mental Health Association states that suicide is the second highest cause of death for youth aged 10 to 24. But if you're a First Nation youth, it is the #1 leading cause of death here in our country. Here to share his struggle with suicide and where he found hope, welcome Brandon Kicknosway. It's good to have you here today, Brandon.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Good. Now, you grew up on Walpole Island at First Nation Reserve. And, you know, for most of the people watching, high school was a time of excitement and fun. But for you, it wasn't the case. Describe some of those struggles that you were going through.
Yeah, so for me, it was I got caught up in like the usual flow of how like things go with like youth. You get distracted by all these things. You're just like, oh man, this looks good, this looks good. And for me, like pretty much my thing was like I was in a relationship where that was pretty much like I poured myself into, and that was my everything. And then I got into smoking pot, and just like my life was consumed with just about me. And then that's kind of where it started to go downhill, when my life was just about me. Because from there, after a while, I started to steal off my family, and then I was really, really messed up. I would be stealing for pot, for pretty much whatever I wanted, and it was a really dark time. And like, because around that time too, like the hard thing for me was just I was also really manipulative. Like I had this relationship, and when we'd split up, I would threaten suicide. It's like, and it was really, really bad. And I was manipulative and just like these things. It was just like, I was really empty. I didn't really have anything really to live for, because I was caught up in the flow. Everything kind of may have seemed like it was good on the outside, and I was like having fun, but like inside I was empty, because I just hadn't really, I didn't have God, and God was really what filled it. And I was doing all these things, and yeah, it was just.
You had a lot of pain, a lot of anger. Where do you think that pain, where did all that stem from?
Well, it stems from just the fact that, just because it was like me leading my own life, and like I didn't I didn't do it God's way, because like because I did it my own way, I faced the consequences of that. I didn't have peace, I didn't have joy, I didn't have hope, and I was just like, and it was, yeah, it was really sad.
And you felt hopeless. You hit rock bottom. You said that you're on your way to Ottawa in a van to go and participate in a protest, and your girlfriend had broken up with you. You got kicked out of school, and you said that this trip was the turning point for you. Why is that?
So like what happened here was like I wanted to get back with my girlfriend, but that just wasn't the case. Just who I wasn't a good person. And on that trip, on the way back, I was just really angry and I was suicidal. I was just really feeling the weight of it, because I just like, my relationship was my life and that was over. I was just like, I really had no reason to live and what I was believing. And so like we got up the next stop at a plaza, and I got out and I picked up a rock, and I was swearing, I was saying I didn't want to live, and I was yelling, getting loud. And I remember at one point I picked up a rock, and with the size of the fist I grabbed it, and I was just bashing it off my head. And then I remember some people were coming around like, what are you doing? Stop, stop, stop. And just basically like from that moment I just really realized I needed to change, and that just really led the path for me, just like, okay, I got to do something now. Like after that, I was going to counseling, but even the counseling wasn't really the changing point. The thing for me was like, when I had an encounter with God, and like that happened through my sister, which was like June 1st, 2015. I came home at like midnight, and my sister was sitting on the couch, and since I was really selfish, I didn't really chat with her or anything. We didn't really have a relationship. So that night, I felt like I should sit down and talk with her. And that night we sat down to talk for like 6 hours. We talked like pretty much all night. And we got to talking about God at one point. I just really shared my heart. And then at one point, I just really realized that like God is real. Like he loves me, and he can fix my family, because there was just so much brokenness, just because I was always angry and I was just living a really bad life.
So you've had a transformation, a big transformation in your life. God came into your life. You've started your healing journey. You're in school, you're doing some inner healing. Do you still struggle with suicide today, Brandon?
Well, to be honest, like it is a thing. Like it is hard. Like the thoughts come, but I know like Jesus is with me, and I have God's on my side. Like things can be hard, and like God, life is hard. It's especially hard when you're trying to follow Jesus. But it's just like, God, every single thing that happens in my life, you're going to turn it for my good. And like, even if I'm weak, he's strong and he's going to help me out. So I'm just like, you know what, God, even when it's really, really hard, you got me, and like you love me. So I'm just like, I can pretty much take on anything because he's with me. So
thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing and being so real with your story.
No problem.
We love these life-changing stories here on 100 Huntley Street. And like Brandon, maybe you hit rock bottom and you may want to give up on life. You think that life is not worth living. I want to speak into your life today and let you know that you're valuable, that your value is not about how you feel. And yes, it is real. We don't want to put that aside, but we want you to understand that you don't have to do this alone. Jesus Christ is with you, and he's allowed people to have wisdom to walk you through these tough times. Give our prayer lines a call at 1-866-273-4444, or send us an email at prayer@crossroads.ca. We want to walk with you and pray with you through these tough times. We'll be right back with Cheryl and her guest after this.
The saddest person on planet Earth is a person who knows God but is not in fellowship with God. The Bible calls it backsliding. And there's actually a story in Psalm 137 of an entire nation that was suffering the results of not following God and of disobeying God. And you know, there's a statement I have, it's one of the greatest statements I've ever heard. It's really helped me a lot and kept me out of trouble. And it says, sin will take you farther than you want to go. It will keep you longer than you want to stay. And it'll cost you more than you want to pay. The good news is there's always a remedy for that. The backslider doesn't have to continuously backslide. The front porch, the Father's sitting there. The lights are on. The door's unlocked. He's always waiting for us to come home. And so I want to say to anyone out there who's living in Heartbreak Hotel because they built it themselves, they're in misery, they're sad because they're the ones that disobeyed God, you can always come back to God. You can sing a new song. It can be a new day. God's grace is fresh. His mercies are new every morning. He has never yet in eternity turned away anyone who wants to come back to Him.
Call now with your donation and request your copy of 52 Weeks Through the Psalms devotional by Dr. James Merritt, 1-800-265-3100, or you can make your donation at CROSSROADS.CA/donate. This one-year daily devotional will help you dive into God's Word and find new reasons to come before Him in prayer and praise. This book is our thanks for your generous ministry support. With your gift of $45 or more, we'd love to send you this devotional. 1-800-265-3100 or CROSSROADS.CA/donate.
Canada is in the midst of what has been called an anxiety epidemic, with more than 40% of us at high risk for mental health issues. And it's not just affecting us adults. A recent study in this province found that 50% of parents are concerned about their child's anxiety level. To help us unpack why kids are feeling so stressed and to give us tips on what we can do about it, I'm joined by author and social justice advocate Tim Huff. Thank you so much for joining us. And what
Nice to be back.
is going on with our kids?
Well, I don't think it's just going on with our children. I think it's going on all the way along with all of society. So the trickle down to our kids is intense. So mental health among our kids is, particularly around fear and anxiety, is so heightened in ways it's never been in society. In the book, we actually start by talking a little bit about the idea that sometimes our kids are afraid looking at the adults be afraid.
It's how we're reacting.
Yeah.
Now, you've really unpacked this in this book, I Am Safe. You co-wrote it with Iona Snare. Tell me what this book does.
So, am I safe is kind of the question that we feel a lot of children ask and a lot of adults ask. Am I safe? The first line actually came to me when my kids were 8 and 4 and not during 9/11. Believe it or not. That's how long this has been in my head. Now my kids are 25 and 21. And it was, am I safe? Am I okay? Something's very wrong today. And that's the first stanza in the kids portion. And we all ask that when we just sense something is off. And even if when children aren't sure what it is, when they can tell, maybe I should be afraid because everyone else looks afraid.
You mentioned 9/11, and you referenced something called Mean World Syndrome that's kind of driving some of this in our culture. What is Mean World Syndrome?
Yeah, Mean World Syndrome would be, in layperson's term, to just look at the whole world and you see the darkness and the despair, 24-hour news cycle, all kinds of gun activity and shooting and war and things to be fearful, and we have to get past that. And part of that is seeing, of course, that there are good people. We talk about 7 different ways you can actually combat Mean World Syndrome, and the one that my favorite in it, which we use as the last one, is to always look for the helpers. Focus on the helpers. Be reminded of the helpers and the hope givers in any kind of story. See who's running in to help and make a difference.
Okay, so you're talking about giving your kids resiliency. That is one way that you can fight this kind of culture of fear we're in. What does that mean?
It's like to be able to cope and to bounce back, and the idea that we could thrive. And how do we get our young people from feeling burdened and taken back and withdrawn and terrified to a place that they come back to a place of maybe a bit of a ground zero in their wellness, and then eventually the idea is always thriving. I mean, even the idea of compassion is the idea not just that we endure together, which is what the etymology of the word compassion means, but that ultimately we endure together so that we could thrive together and be well together.
And isn't helping other people, moving in compassion, part of helping us with our mental health when we're not getting stuck on ourselves kind of in a way?
Well, within the Compassion series, the program I run, we always say, bring hope, serve well, and celebrate. And the serve well piece is I always, whenever I'm speaking, I tell people, I have yet to see someone not be at their best when they're serving well. It brings out their own health.
You think about, we're talking about giving kids skills. You talk about that a lot in the book. Give them skills. Don't just, give them compassion, but actually help equip them. But as a parent, like, you want to save your children sometimes, and you don't want your kids to experience any pain or fear, any of it. And that transition from, saving them or equipping them to save themselves, I guess, is in a sense a parent's job. How do you figure that out as a
trying to
parent?
fix, I mean, as a dad, I went through all that, never less someone writing it, someone who's worked with kids on the streets most of my life who suffer all kinds of anxieties. The idea that I'm not going to be able to fix it myself, but maybe I will bring in all the tools I can to help. There's a whole listening piece. Sometimes parents, I know for me, I hadn't always been as good as I should have been at listening. I was so busy trying to fix that I wasn't actually hearing everything that was coming in. It is, when I've done some speaking on this, workshops on it, I was surprised at the first one. I had to change actually what we were doing at the end, because after a little discussion time, so many adults, once they'd heard some of the concepts about even like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you can't get past the safety and security place, you'll never get to the confidence and the belonging place and stuff like that. And in tears, the parents would start to say, okay, I've done everything wrong. And so we had to have a time where I would share time to forgive yourself.
Yes.
And just start to
big part of
work
parenting.
to get it as right as you can, not to carry this weight. We're trying to move forward in that.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I
Sure.
want to leave. One of the things I loved about this book is that you give activities that parents can do with kids that help to give them those skills and that equipping. What is one thing a parent watching this can do right now to help their kid fight anxiety and fear?
Well, so I would definitely say we have there's all kinds of activities in here. There's something called a courage kit. And if you find the book, or you can go online to the Compassion series, you can see. And you can make these little kits that a kid could keep in their pocket or their backpack or stuff. And there's little reminders in there of ways they can be okay. One example is a stone from a summer camp that you've gone to and successfully were able to accomplish being there, or names of other kids that suffer from anxiety that you can think about, a picture of someone in your life to be reminded of what they will always say. And I would say, we do have a gift from Steve Bell in here, a special song from him. And that song, you get a download to it, you gather around, and it's written for families that are trying to deal and cope with anxiety and find restoration and health and wellness.
Am I Safe, Iona Snare and Tim Huff. Make sure you get your copy. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks,
We
Cheryl.
just touched the surface of a very deep topic in
Indeed.
culture. Thank you.
All the best.
And if you're watching this and you're going, man, I'm experiencing anxiety, or I'm a parent who I don't even know where to start with helping my child navigate these things, we can definitely offer you prayer and support. If you want to just give us a call and you just need someone to say, hey, we need God's strength to make a difference in this, we will do that with you. That number is 1-866-273-4444. We would love to walk this journey with you. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Castle is the first video streaming service that's been created to serve you, with high-quality, faith-based media for all ages and a live 24/7 prayer chat. Castle features Christian TV shows, documentaries, teaching series, and kids content. Start your free 30-day trial of Castle and discover this quality Christian resource made for your entertainment and your spiritual growth. Sign up now at intothecastle.com.
Anger can lead to a hardened heart, but forgiveness can lead to freedom. The Bible encourages us not to let anger get the best of us, but let us overcome anger through forgiveness. If anger's got a hold of your heart, call our 24/7 prayer lines at 1-866-273-4444 or visit CROSSROADS.CA/247 prayer. Anytime, anywhere, we're here for you.
When you are lonely, confused, or afraid, think of me standing by you. I am no more than a heartbeat away. me standing by you. The heart is like a home where you are not alone. First light of morning and last light of day, think of me standing by you. When it's a struggle for you to be calm, think of me standing by you. When you are worried that something's gone wrong, think of me standing by you. Our love is like a home where you are not alone. Keep as a treasure the heart of this tune, and think of me standing by you. When you can't name that fear you feel, you can still know that love is real too. Sometimes your thoughts leave you weak and upset. Think of me standing by you. Pause for a moment to take a deep breath and think of me standing by you. Your heart is always home to those you call your own. Take heart and take courage and never forget to think of me standing by you. Think of me standing by you.
Hey, Mark Clark here, the author of The Problem of God. We're exploring the 10 major questions that skeptics have toward Christianity, and that was me growing up. I didn't walk into a church till I was 19, and one of the major problems I actually had was the church itself, the problem of hypocrisy, which we're talking about today. The fact that the church says they believe something, but they don't actually live it out. They say they want to be godly and holy, but they just act like the rest of the world, so why would I want to really believe in this? And there's a few things to really respond in regard to this. The first one is when we look into the church and we see people who are hypocritical, the first thing that we got to understand is we shouldn't expect anything different. Partly for two reasons. The first one is the church is full of people who aren't actually Christians. So I run a church. I have about 5,000 people in our church across many sites in the west coast of Canada, in Vancouver and Calgary. And when I look out at the people, you know, there's lots of people who look and say, well, look at that person. They come to your church and they don't act right. Their life's a disaster, and I saw them smoking out in front of the church, and they parked their car up on my, you know, the wheels up on my lawn, and I came out and they gave me the middle finger and said, hey, you know, I'm going to ignore you, I'm going to church. So what is that? What kind of Christians are these? And the reality is the church should be full of people like that, because it's people who recognize the poverty of their own spirit that actually need to come to church and hear about God and hear about Jesus and how to be transformed. If your church doesn't have people like that, I'm not sure you're reaching people who don't know Jesus yet. And so we're all broken, and we should expect that the church is full of people who don't actually know Jesus. Secondly, the church is full of people who say they know Jesus, but they actually don't. And that shouldn't surprise us, because Jesus actually said in Matthew chapter 7, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who said they believe in me, that are doing miracles in my name, but in the end, when they die and they come to the judgment seat, they don't actually, Jesus is like, I don't even know you, away from me. That they said something externally, but they didn't actually believe it in their heart. And so there's not only false teachers out there, there's actually false disciples. And so when you look into the church, you have to recognize there's a whole bunch of people who say they believe, but they don't. And the reality is this, at the end of the day, of course, you can look through church history and see that Christians have done bad things, and it's because they've misunderstood the teachings of Jesus. Any kind of historical moment where the church is killing people or burning witches or whatever your reasons are, even though those stats have been gravely exaggerated. If you read Dan Brown's novel, The Da Vinci Code, for instance, he says that the church maybe killed 5 million witches. Well, that would be like a large percentage of the entire population of the world at the point that he's talking about. Whereas the history actually tells us there was closer to maybe 20 or 30 in particular areas. But the point is that even if they're not exaggerated, those actions are done because the church misunderstood the teachings of Jesus, whose constant ethic was to turn the other cheek and to love your enemy, not kill them. So sometimes when we look back and we see these wars that were done in Jesus' name, they weren't actually done in the name of Christianity. They were geopolitical wars that people used Christianity, and then they went out and had their nation-state wars. No one actually who's read the Gospels would say that's what Jesus wants us to do. So we've got to understand something. There's a difference between the church and how they've maybe messed things up and continue to, and Jesus. And what I would challenge you to is to wipe all the actions of people, Christians themselves, off the table, because they're going to mess this up. And then put on the table the person and the work of Jesus. Because at the end of the day, as C.S. Lewis said, when you get to in front of God, he's not going to ask you what your neighbor did. He's not going to ask you what you read in books. He's going to ask you, what did you actually do with your life? And as one writer has said, if I'm walking along a path and you ask me the way home, and I point it out to you, but I'm walking along the path drunkenly and I'm falling side to side, it doesn't mean that path isn't the way home. It just means I'm walking along it drunkenly. I'm messing up. And our call in life is to actually look to Jesus, not the people who try to follow him, and judge his ideas and the truth based on him. If you found out that Einstein was a kleptomaniac, would it mean that his science was actually wrong? Or would it mean that you're judging the wrong things? Sometimes when we look at Christianity, we have what scholars call trivial objections, things that we're evaluating that have nothing to actually do with the question on hand. And that, I would say, is the issue that people have with the problem of hypocrisy. Don't judge it on the people, judge it on the person of Jesus.
Oh, I just love Mark Clark and the way that he communicates. And, you know, I often say to people, don't judge God for what people do. Or more importantly, if I do something that is great, then that is probably God working through me. And if I do something terrible, that's just me. Don't blame him.
and people say that we are representatives of God, and we are, but we are so broken that you really can't judge God using us. And I mean, the supreme ethic of Jesus is love. He's perfect, but we're not.
Yeah, and if you've built a wall up between you and God because of something that some person of faith has done or the church has done, maybe you've seen scandals that the church has done and you just said, I don't want any part of it, I just want to take a moment right now and ask you to forgive us. And just say no, and just admit, we don't get it all right, we don't do it all right, we don't represent Jesus as well as we should, and so sometimes we're legalistic and judgmental, and so just please forgive us and let that go today. You know, you forgiving the church and the judgments you have made is just a place for you to be more free and more loving and more at peace in your life, and who doesn't want that? I would love that.
I would absolutely love that, and I mean, even as a Christian sometimes, we get hurt by people in the church, and we hurt people too, so we sometimes just have to give each other some grace and allow God to continue working on us, because we're still a work in progress, Cheryl.
Yeah, and I think we have to give what we want. You know, we all want to be loved unconditionally. We all want people to have grace for us on those days that we're cranky and we're late and we're yelling at our kids, or, you know, we just don't have it all together.
Yeah.
Well, we have to give that out too, and we have to give it out when we don't feel like it sometimes, and sometimes it's just a choice. And I've done that many times where I've just been like, I want to react a different way. I want to be impatient, probably is one of my faults. But instead, I just choose to just swallow that and smile and just chill out.
And I hope that you can chill out today and just breathe and allow Christ to breathe in and through you.
And I want to remind you too, today is a day that we are talking about mental health. And, you know, we do provide supports for people. Sometimes you can just feel all alone, and that cannot contribute toward good mental health. If you just want to know there's somebody with you, someone to pray for you, give our prayer lines a call. That number is 1-866-273-4444, and we would love to pray with you. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
It's like, how many fours?
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a member of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2.
Cheryl Weber's wardrobe provided by Melanie Lynn.